Outside the main entrance of Metropolitan General Hospital, Ethan scanned the bustling Chicago street, his eyes searching for a familiar face. He spotted him across the road, a towering figure who waved with an enthusiasm that matched his own. That was Leo. As they met in a firm embrace, Leo's shout carried across the traffic, a booming declaration of how much he'd missed his oldest friend. Ethan gave him a friendly punch to the shoulder, his hand meeting solid muscle. He remarked on how Leo seemed to have packed on even more mass since they'd last seen each other. Leo just grinned, flexing a bicep and confirming it was from his relentless training regimen. He explained that preparing for the national triathlon qualifiers had been all-consuming. They lamented the bad timing that had kept them apart. Ethan's residency had started just as Leo's intensive training camp began, cutting off all communication. By the time Leo was free, Ethan had been deployed to Florida for hurricane relief efforts. Leo mentioned having seen the news reports, how he'd been stunned to see a photo of Ethan looking impossibly heroic amidst the devastation. Ethan brushed it off with a wave of his hand, complaining about the headache the subsequent media attention had caused him. He felt the praise was unnecessary. He was just doing his job. Leo understood completely, assuring him the news cycle would forget about it in a few days. Ethan expressed his regret for missing Leo's final qualifying race, which had been held right there in the city. Leo was cheerful about it, insisting it was no big deal. He reasoned that a third-place finish wasn't worth seeing anyway and told Ethan to wait until he was standing on the top of the podium. Ethan laughed, agreeing he would be there for that. With an arm slung over Ethan's shoulders, Leo wondered what was on the menu for the evening. Ethan suggested their usual spot, a classic diner with worn vinyl booths just a few blocks away. They were neighbors, having grown up in houses next to each other, their bond an extension of their mother's own deep friendship. The two women had been inseparable for decades, marrying and becoming pregnant in the same year, buying homes in the same subdivision. After Ethan's father passed away, it was Leo's family who had provided the unwavering support that saw them through. Their mothers had even joked about them getting married one day, a plan comically thwarted when they both had sons. Years later, when Ethan came out at 18, his mother and grandmother's first question had been whether he and Leo were finally a couple. The memory still made them both laugh. In a strange way, Ethan felt he owed Leo for his family's easy acceptance. Seated across from each other in a booth, they caught up on the intervening months. Leo described the grueling nature of his training and shared amusing stories from his competitions. Ethan recounted the trials of his residency, the relentless pressure of the emergency department, and the torment of his attending physician, a man he described as a devil who had, by a cruel twist of fate, also become his landlord. After dinner, they strolled along the lakeside path, the conversation flowing easily from one topic to another, just as it had when they were kids. Suddenly, shouts from further down the path broke the evening calm. Someone had fallen into the water. They sprinted toward the commotion. In the dim light, they could just make out a small figure bobbing in the dark, churning water. It looked like a child. The memory of cold water filling his lungs, the sheer panic from 8 years ago, seized Ethan. He wanted to help, but his body was frozen. He turned to see Leo already kicking off his shoes, his socks next. As a triathlete, swimming was second nature to him. Leo stretched his arms, preparing to dive in. He gave Ethan a reassuring look, remarking that his third-place state ranking wasn't just for show. Dr. Chloe Martinez finished her rounds and walked back to the nurse's station, finding Dr. Julian Vance still hunched over a stack of patient charts. She leaned against his desk with a cup of water, playfully asking if the hospital's top workaholic ever went home. Julian, focused on the chart in front of him, continued making notes with his pen, ignoring her question. Chloe raised an eyebrow, guessing aloud that perhaps his little tenant wasn't home tonight. Julian's reply was clipped, heavy as stone. He was out with a friend. Before Chloe could pry further, the office door burst open. A new nurse, looking flustered, announced an incoming emergency call. A child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, had been pulled from Lake Michigan and was being brought in. She paused to catch her breath, adding that the person who called 911 was one of their own residents. Dr. Ethan Cole. Chloe's heart clenched. She asked anxiously if Ethan had jumped in. The nurse shook her head, admitting she didn't know. The dispatcher hadn't said. Less than 10 minutes later, the ambulance screamed to a halt at the ER entrance. But when the doors opened, Ethan was not inside. The patient on the gurney was a grimacing adult male. The paramedic briefed Julian, 51-year-old male with a history of diabetes and poorly managed coronary artery disease. He'd consumed a large amount of alcohol before experiencing sudden, crushing chest pain. Julian had no time for anything else, his focus immediately shifting to the critical patient. As they wheeled the man into the trauma bay, Julian caught sight of Ethan getting out of a second ambulance. His face was a mask of grim determination as he continued to perform CPR on a small, still form. Julian noted with a flicker of relief that Ethan's clothes were dry. Inside Trauma Bay 3, Julian worked tirelessly. After a tense struggle, the patient was stabilized. Just then, Chloe pushed through the door. She told him she would take over, urging him to go check on Ethan. Julian, removing his stethoscope, asked what was wrong. Chloe simply shook her head, telling him that Ethan wouldn't stop. She said Julian should just go. The scene in the adjacent bay was somber. The patient, a young boy, lay on the bed, eyes closed, a faint blue tinge around his lips. The heart monitor displayed a flat, unwavering line. He had no vital signs. Ethan, however, stood over him, continuing chest compressions with a relentless rhythm. His damp hair was plastered to his forehead, his t-shirt soaked through with sweat, clinging to the lean contours of his chest. Julian took the medical certificate of death from the attending nurse. The boy had been declared brain dead 40 minutes ago. It was an irreversible, total loss of brain function. No amount of effort could change the outcome. Julian stood behind him and stated Ethan's name, telling him that was enough. Ethan gave no indication he had heard. His hands remained locked, his body a machine dedicated to a hopeless task. Julian repeated his name, his voice firmer now, instructing him not to waste any more effort. It was as if Ethan couldn't hear him, a perpetual motion machine fueled by a desperate hope. He murmured to the boy, urging him to wake up, not to sleep, telling him his mother was waiting. Ethan, I will not repeat myself a third time. Julian's voice was as cold and unforgiving as the water that had claimed the boy. The finality in his tone finally broke through. Ethan's hands fell away from the child's chest, but his gaze remained fixed, as if trying to pull the boy's spirit back with the force of his will alone. Julian placed the death certificate on the counter and walked out. Head bowed, Ethan followed him. As they emerged, Leo rushed forward, his own clothes still dripping, asking what had happened. Ethan just shook his head, murmuring that if he had been a little faster, it might have been different. Leo, standing barefoot on the cold tile floor, tried to reassure him it wasn't his fault. Ethan took off his own jacket and draped it over Leo's shoulders, telling him to get home and not catch a cold. After saying goodbye, Ethan turned and followed Julian's, retreating back into the staff lounge. The bright fluorescent lights were blinding. Ethan slumped into a chair in a dark corner, his head feeling too heavy to hold up. Julian stood before him, an emotionless interrogator. He asked for the medical standards for determining death. Ethan answered automatically, his voice hollow, listing cardiac death and brain death. Julian pressed on, asking which was more widely accepted. Brain death. He then demanded the criteria for determining brain death. Ethan recited the list: coma of established cause, absence of brainstem reflexes, apnea, and a flat EEG. The Chicago air was still warm for the season, but Julian's demeanor held none of the gentleness Ethan had glimpsed on a snowy night months ago. He demanded to know what Ethan had done wrong today. Ethan's response was bitten off, a spark of defiance in his voice as he said he at least wasn't as cold as Julian. Julian shot back that, as an emergency physician, Ethan was wasting medical resources, occupying a limited space, and hindering the department's efficiency. Ethan's voice rose, laced with frustration. He wasn't an ER doctor, he was just a resident. He felt Julian was being too lenient with him lately, and now he was taking it out on him. He said he wouldn't dare, but his tone and posture screamed defiance. Julian then asked him what he believed the mission of an ER doctor was. To save lives, Ethan answered without hesitation. Julian countered his simple answer, asking how one saves lives. Randomly? Blindly? Pouring all resources into one person without a thought for the consequences. He presented a scenario. If 10 people were drowning instead of one, who would Ethan save first? The one with minor injuries, the critically ill, or whichever one he happened to like the look of? Was he supposed to keep trying to save one until he decided he was done, while others waited? Ethan argued that he was on his own time, off the clock. Julian dismissed this immediately. The moment he began CPR, no one cared if he was on duty or not. They only saw a doctor performing a rescue. In the professional arena, arguing with Julian was like throwing eggs at a stone. Ethan fell silent. The ER is a semi-public space, Julian continued. Every move is watched by patients, families, even reporters. He asked Ethan if he looked at patients with prejudice, if he categorized them into different classes. Ethan blurted out that of course he didn't, he would never. Julian then asked him what precisely he had just been doing. He told him to think carefully about what he should have done. He should have been objective, calm, and fair, treating every patient equally. In a limited time, he should have maximized the chances of rescue for the greatest number, not wasting a single second. It wasn't that the ER was heartless or that doctors were cold. It was that emotion clouds judgment. Finally, Ethan's clenched fists relaxed. He conceded that it was his fault today and told Julian to punish him as he saw fit. But Julian didn't issue a punishment. He explained that everything he had just said was his duty as his attending physician. What he wanted to say next, however, was as a friend or an older brother. He asked Ethan what was wrong, what he was remembering. Ethan had been in the ER for 3 months. He had faced death more than once and could usually analyze a crisis and make decisions quickly. Even when he was new, he hadn't been like this. The room was quiet. Ethan tried to speak 3 times, but no words came out. Julian didn't press him. He told him to come on, he would take him home. Then the words spilled out. Ethan confessed that the boy had been talking to him, telling him he wanted to live, to see his mom. It sounded insane, but he'd heard it, just like when he was a child himself. Ethan would never forget being 8 years old, the terror of being swallowed by the water, the pain, the desire to just let go and sleep forever. But a doctor had been there, calling to him, telling him to wake up, not to sleep. The compressions on his chest hurt, but the doctor persisted, telling him to open his eyes, that his mother was waiting. He remembered his mother, and how if he didn't wake up, she would be devastated. He had promised himself he would grow up fast and protect her. Ethan's shoulders trembled. He knew how absurd it sounded, but he had truly heard the boy's voice, just like he'd heard that doctor's voice all those years ago. Julian's reply was soft. It wasn't absurd. He believed him. He said he had heard the boy, too. He had said he was scared, that he wanted his mom. Ethan felt helpless, telling Julian the boy had begged him for help, promising to be good, to listen to his mom and grandma. But he couldn't save him. Julian spoke gently, his tone softening, reminding Ethan that he was just a doctor, not a god who could reverse death. Ethan bit his lip, wondering why he couldn't have just 5 more minutes. Julian patted his shoulder, assuring him he had done his best. The boy was so young, Ethan choked out, his shoulders shaking. How could he protect his mother now? Julian told him it was okay to cry, to not hold it in. Ethan roughly brushed away his hand, insisting he wasn't crying, that his mother didn't like it when he cried. But he couldn't stop the tears. He turned away, tilting his chin up, trying to force the salty grief back down. He repeated to himself that he'd done everything he could, that he wouldn't be discouraged, that everything would be okay. The overhead light suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. A hand turned his shoulders, another pressed against the small of his back, and he found himself pulled into Julian's chest. The scent of mint and antiseptic enveloped him as he was held tightly. A quiet voice reassured him that it was dark here. His mother couldn't see. Holding back tears felt like drowning. Ethan didn't know how to swim, how to breathe. But Julian held him, a steady anchor, his presence like artificial respiration, a close, grounding force. Ethan was like a startled animal, his head tilted back, forehead brushing against Julian's shirt. The tears finally came, a torrent of grief, fear, and frustration soaking into the dry, clean cotton. Julian stood perfectly still, holding him until the storm of emotion passed. When Ethan was finally cried out, Julian led him to a cot and handed him a glass of water. Ethan sniffled, surreptitiously glancing in Julian's direction. The man had his back to him, unbuttoning his shirt. Without turning on the light, the neon glow from a billboard across the street cast long shadows, outlining the strong, defined muscles of Julian's back and shoulders. He looked like the hero in a graphic novel. Ethan was thirsty, but he clutched the glass, his mind racing. He wondered what his chest and abs looked like. Julian turned, his damp shirt in hand, and stood before him. He asked if he liked the view. Ethan feigned ignorance, looking away. Julian leaned down, a teasing smile playing on his lips. He said he'd seen him watching in the mirror. Ethan denied it, turning his head further away, accusing him of being narcissistic. Julian gently took his chin and turned his face forward, explaining that the full-length mirror behind him had given him away. Ethan, flustered, retorted defensively, asking what was wrong with looking. Julian played along, offering to let him see the front, for free. Ethan tried to act nonchalant, claiming the back was average, so the front was probably nothing special either. Julian leaned close, his voice a low murmur by Ethan's ear. He asked if anyone had ever told him that his ears turn red when he lies. Flustered, Ethan jumped up, grabbed the wet shirt, and announced he would wash it and return it. Julian told him not to bother, but Ethan was insistent. It was he who was taking advantage, after all. He was just going to throw both their clothes into the washing machine to save on the $200 housekeeping fee he was supposed to pay. Julian handed him the shirt, his expression softening as he asked if he was feeling better. Ethan nodded. Julian ruffled his hair, calling him a little lobster. Ethan mumbled that the store's anniversary special was also free. Julian asked if he wasn't afraid he'd get used to it. Ethan didn't understand the implication, asking what that had to do with anything. Julian just smiled, telling him it was nothing. He said he had to go handle a patient handover, and then he would take him home. When Julian came out of the lounge, he saw Leo waiting. The young man's athletic build was unmistakable. Leo smiled brightly and asked how his friend was doing. Julian glanced at him, then at the jacket draped over his shoulders, noting that it was no longer warm. He took the jacket from Leo, handed it to a nurse to find him something dry, and told Leo not to wait up. Ethan was going home with him. On the way, Ethan fell asleep against the passenger window. Julian slowed the car, not waking him even when they reached Ethan's family home. It was late fall in Chicago, and the nights were cool. The heater was on, and the warm air stirred the blonde tips of Ethan's hair. His earring glinted with a soft, matte finish. His ears, now their normal color, were a telltale sign of his emotions. They turned red not just when he lied, but when he was drunk, angry, shy, or had been crying. They were naturally alluring. Asleep, the young man was defenseless. Julian's breath fanned across his jaw. "Dr. Vance? What are you doing?" Ethan's eyes fluttered open, startled by the face so close to his. Julian straightened up, his expression as placid as a glass of water, and simply stated that they had arrived. Ethan yawned and looked out the window, surprised to see his own house. He wanted to go home, but he had a shift the next day, and getting up in the cold was torture. Julian told him he was giving him the day off to spend with his family. Ethan, grateful, unbuckled his seatbelt, ready to jump out of the car. He paused, wondering if he should say something more formal. Julian spoke first, telling him he would pick him up the morning after next. Ethan got out, waved, and told him to drive safe and to text him when he got home. As the car disappeared, Ethan was still processing his own audacity. Making his attending physician pick him up for work and demanding a safety text? He must have sounded incredibly presumptuous. He figured Julian was in a hurry and probably didn't even hear him. He opened the door quietly, but his mother still woke up. She was surprised to see him, thinking he wasn't coming home until the following week. He explained that Dr. Vance had given him the day off. His mother found that odd, remarking that he always seemed so strict. Ethan could only shrug, suggesting maybe he'd had a moment of conscience. His mother's expression grew serious, asking why he hadn't told her about the hurricane relief mission. The news had been everywhere. Ethan admitted he hadn't wanted her and his grandmother to worry. She came over and hugged him, telling him she supported him doing what he loved, but asking him to please let her know next time. Just then, his grandmother appeared. Before he could explain, he used his day off as an excuse, praising Julian profusely. His grandmother joined in, suggesting they invite his kind teacher over for dinner sometime. Ethan, exhausted, mumbled a non-committal reply and said good night. In the bathroom, he took Julian's shirt out of the washing machine and began to wash it by hand. Though it wasn't dirty, he scrubbed it meticulously. After his shower, he hung the shirt up to dry and climbed into bed. He wondered how Leo was doing, then opened his phone to a flood of unread messages. 2 were from Leo. The rest were from Julian. The last message, sent over an hour ago, was a simple confirmation that he had gotten home safely. He agonized over whether to reply. What if he was asleep? He didn't want to wake him, but not replying seemed rude. He wrapped himself in his blanket and typed, "Are you asleep?" Less than 30 seconds later, his phone rang. Not yet. Julian's voice was cool, as if it had just come out of a freezer. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine, convinced the demon was angry. He stammered that Julian should get some rest. Julian's voice was laced with a threat. "Ethan, your nerve is growing. You left me hanging for an hour and 16 minutes. Ethan quickly explained that he had been in the shower and had also washed his shirt, scrubbing it thoroughly by hand, which was why it took so long. Julian's tone softened slightly, and he instructed him to message him back first next time, before washing his clothes. The next time Ethan saw Julian was 2 mornings later when he climbed into his car at precisely 7:10. He handed over the freshly laundered shirt, along with another bag. He explained that his grandmother had made steamed buns, and there was a container of sausage and egg and some homemade pickles. Julian placed the bag on the back seat and started the car. The morning traffic was light, and they arrived at the hospital with time to spare. Ethan pointed to the still unopened breakfast bag, asking if Julian wasn't going to eat. He warned him that breakfast was important and he wouldn't have time once they were in the department. Without waiting for a reply, Ethan was out of the car and gone. Julian held the warm coffee cup, his gaze lingering on the empty passenger seat. So many people tried to curry favor with him, yet this one couldn't seem to get away fast enough. The first day back was chaos. The ER was a revolving door of critical cases, and Ethan barely had time to breathe, let alone eat. By the time things calmed down, it was the end of his shift. He passed a closed door to a treatment room. Julian was still inside. He checked his phone. A message from Julian, sent 10 minutes earlier, told him to just go home when his shift was over. As he was changing, he ran into Chloe. She asked if he was leaving already. He nodded, confirming his shift had ended. She lowered her voice, asking if he wasn't going to wait for his teacher. The fact that Ethan was Julian's tenant was an open secret that no one acknowledged directly. Ethan just said that Dr. Vance was still busy and had told him to leave. Chloe smiled knowingly. "I shouldn't be the one to tell you this, but it's his birthday today." The information clicked in Ethan's mind. He thanked her and said he'd go help out so Julian could get home earlier to celebrate. Chloe wanted to roll her eyes. With a family busier than he was, who did he think was celebrating with him? When Julian finally went to the locker room, he found Ethan dozing against the locker. He asked why he hadn't left. Ethan yawned and said he was waiting to hitch a ride. Julian wondered what the kid was up to. Walking out of the ER, Ethan asked him if he knew what day it was. Julian said he didn't. Ethan told him to guess. Julian wouldn't play along. "It's your birthday," Ethan announced. Julian paused, then confirmed the date. He asked how he knew. Ethan told him Dr. Martinez had mentioned it. Julian's lips curved into a slight smile. "So, what grand gesture have you planned to suck up to me?" Ethan admitted he had no gift. He had nothing planned at all. He just wanted to know how Julian wanted to celebrate. Julian, hands in his pockets, said he didn't feel like celebrating. He asked how he usually spent his birthdays. Julian's answer was simple. He didn't. There was a touch of sadness to it that caught Ethan off guard. Ethan wasn't great at celebrating birthdays himself. For Leo, it was usually just dinner, a new pair of sneakers, or a gift card for a video game. But Julian lived in a penthouse, drove a luxury car, and clearly wasn't interested in video games. The only thing he could think of was a personal touch. He offered, if Julian didn't mind, to have him over for dinner. He explained that his mom and grandma were amazing cooks. Then he reconsidered, thinking Julian must be tired, and offered to take him out instead, his treat. He'd just gotten his residence salary and stipend. Julian looked at him, a genuine question in his eyes. Did he really want to celebrate his birthday? Ethan nodded earnestly. After a moment, Julian made a request. "Cook for me." Ethan readily agreed, asking what he wanted to eat. Julian's answer was simple: whatever Ethan wanted to make. They decided to go to the supermarket first. On the way, Ethan suggested Julian go home and rest while he did the shopping, but Julian insisted on going with him. He recalled that the last time Ethan had cooked for Chloe, the pantry had been nearly bare, limiting his culinary expression. This time, he was determined to be fully prepared. Ethan rarely ate at the hospital cafeteria. He usually ate with an old janitor named Abe who worked in the basement morgue. Sometimes Abe cooked, sometimes Ethan did. Abe never let him pay, so Ethan would bring him snacks or fruit. He bought these at the supermarket across from Julian's apartment building. It was his favorite store with a huge selection and frequent sales. Today, there was a big promotion on. He noticed that Julian's preferred brands of paper towels, laundry detergent, and toothpaste were all on sale. He decided to stock up. Ethan buzzed around the aisles, enthusiastically filling the cart, while Julian pushed it from behind, a novel sense of domesticity settling over him. Before Ethan moved in, a cleaning service handled all the household necessities. This was the first time he had even been in this store. He could count on one hand the number of times he'd been in a large supermarket in his entire life. Right now, it felt strangely like building a life. When the cart was full, Ethan declared they were ready to check out. Julian pointed out that they hadn't bought any actual food yet. The cart was filled with seasonings, snacks, and household supplies. Ethan explained that they would buy fresh ingredients at the farmer's market. The produce at the supermarket was only delivered once a day and wouldn't be fresh in the afternoon. He was especially particular about meat, preferring freshly butchered poultry to the refrigerated kind. He mentioned he had already called a vendor at the market to reserve 2 chickens for him. Julian was amused by the distinction between a stewing hen and a roasting chicken, but he agreed to go along with Ethan's plan. As they walked to the next aisle, the sound of the cart behind Ethan stopped. He turned back to find Julian standing in the previous aisle, intently studying a gray box. When Ethan got closer, he realized what it was. A hot flush crept up his neck, and he turned to walk away, but Julian caught him by the collar. He asked why he was running. Julian held out the gray box and told him not to buy this brand. Ethan, trying to appear nonchalant, mumbled that he didn't need them anyway. In his head, he was thinking that not everyone was like Julian. Julian, unfazed, picked up a different brand. "You can't be sure you'll never need them," he said. Ethan, deciding to lean into the absurdity of the situation, came back and picked up the box Julian had rejected, asking what was wrong with it. Julian leaned in close, his voice low and conspiratorial, and explained that the quality was terrible. He said they broke with the slightest bit of force. Ethan felt like a piece of charcoal, burnt to a crisp. He couldn't fathom why he was discussing this topic with his attending physician. He forced himself to ask which brand was better. "You'll know when you try," Julian said, pointing to another shelf. He instructed Ethan to get 2 boxes of every brand except that one. Looking at the dozens of boxes of condoms in the cart, Ethan wanted to abandon Julian and flee. It looked like he was stocking up for an apocalypse. After the supermarket, they went to the farmer's market. They bought vegetables and fruit, then headed to the poultry stall. The vendor, a cheerful woman named Angie, spotted Ethan from a distance and waved her cleaver. She had saved him the best chickens. As she efficiently dispatched the birds, her eyes kept drifting to the tall, handsome man standing beside Ethan, the one holding all the shopping bags. She smiled knowingly and asked if he'd brought his boyfriend along. Before Ethan could respond, Julian spoke up, ordering another chicken. Angie's smile widened as she grabbed another bird. remarking on how handsome his boyfriend was and asking what he did for a work. Ethan felt his brain short-circuit. "He's my boss," he tried to clarify, but Julian interrupted again, ordering a duck. Julian then introduced himself as a doctor. Angie was impressed. "Two doctors. A perfect match," she declared. Felt like a comedy routine. Julian didn't seem to mind, so Ethan decided to let it go. As the birds were being processed, Julian had an idea. He asked if they could butcher the birds themselves. He turned to Ethan. "Desensitization therapy, stage 4. You in?" The method was bizarre but not without merit. Ethan rolled up his sleeves. Of course he was. To avoid looking like complete psychopaths, they both put on medical gloves and masks. Standing side by side at the butcher block, 2 chickens lay before them. Julian took the smaller roasting chicken. With practiced precision, their knives sliced through the birds, a grim parody of a surgical procedure. Julian was ostensibly butchering a chicken, but he was really watching Ethan. The same Ethan who used to get squeamish watching medical videos, who couldn't even hold a scalpel steady in the trauma bay, was now calmly gutting a chicken in a bustling market, unfazed by the smell of blood, even remarking that the bird had fatty liver disease. Julian smiled to himself. The kid was ready for a surgical rotation. By the time they left the market, Julian was carrying 3 chickens and a duck. Ethan couldn't understand why they needed so much. Julian explained his plan. 1 roasted, 1 stewed, 1 fried, 1 pan-seared. When Ethan protested that it was wasteful for just the 2 of them, Julian simply said they could freeze the leftovers. It was 6 o'clock when they got home. Ethan took over the kitchen, a whirlwind of activity, refusing any help. An hour later, 2 main dishes, 2 sides, and a soup were on the table. He sat down next to Julian out of habit, then remembered he wasn't at his own family dinner and started to move to the opposite chair. A hand on his shoulder stopped him. Julian told him to stay put. Being so close felt strangely intimate. Julian passed him a pair of chopsticks and took the first bite himself. Ethan, despite his confidence in his cooking, was anxious for a sign of approval. Julian didn't say a word, but the way he kept eating was praise enough. Halfway through the meal, Julian asked if he wanted some wine. He opened a bottle of red and poured them each a small amount. Ethan swirled the glass, noting how little there was, and pushed his glass forward for more. Julian poured a little more, remarking that the bottle cost over $3,000 and it would be a waste to throw any away. "How much?" Ethan almost shouted. Julian calmly repeated the price. Ethan downed the glass in 1 gulp and slammed it on the table. More. If he drank enough, maybe he'd feel rich too. Within half an hour, his vision was starting to blur. He asked Julian why he never celebrated his birthday. Julian's explanation that his family was too busy felt weak. Ethan, emboldened by the wine, told him he could celebrate with colleagues, classmates, or friends. It wasn't about the money. He accused him of making excuses to resent his parents. It was the first time anyone had ever challenged Julian on this. He was momentarily speechless, before conceding that he himself just didn't like celebrating. Ethan couldn't understand it. He started listing all the great things about birthdays. Cake, candles, presents, amusement parks. He then realized those were all childhood joys. Still, he insisted it was a special day. The meal ended around 10. Ethan was still drinking. Julian asked if he was full. Ethan rubbed his stomach and confirmed he was stuffed, but he kept drinking. Julian took the wine glass from him and stood up to clear the dishes. Ethan snatched the plates from him, telling him that as the birthday boy, he was supposed to be resting. He pushed Julian towards the bedroom, his words slurring slightly. Julian, amused, didn't resist. As the bedroom door closed, Ethan felt a small sense of victory. Julian sat on the edge of the bed in the dark room. The wine was stronger than he'd thought. Just as he was about to get up to shower, his phone rang. It was a consultation call from Germany that lasted over an hour. By the time he was done and had showered, it was almost midnight. His birthday was nearly over. He stood by the window, hair still damp, a bathrobe loosely tied around his waist. Rain spattered against the glass. He could see the balcony of the adjacent apartment. The curtains were drawn tight, no light peeking through. That kid always slept well. He checked his watch, 11:52. In 8 minutes, he would no longer be the birthday boy. He had always claimed to dislike birthdays, a defense mechanism born from years of having no one to celebrate with. At 11:53, he wished he had bought a cake. At 11:54, he left his room to get a glass of water. The dining room was dark, the table still a mess. A silhouette stood by the window. The figure spoke first, its voice a familiar grumble. "What took you so long?" A light flickered on. Ethan held a single candle, illuminating a small cake. He was grinning, his eyes curved into crescents, as he sang happy birthday. Julian couldn't remember the last time someone had sung him that song, or if anyone ever had. Ethan urged him to make a wish before it was past midnight. At 11:58, Julian closed his eyes and made the only birthday wish of his life. As he blew out the candle, a dab of frosting was smeared on his nose and lips. He noticed the empty wine bottle and Ethan's flushed face. "You drank it all?" he asked. Ethan, giggling, tried to smear more frosting on his face, mumbling something about not wasting $3,000 wine. He then started to clear the table, but Julian stopped him. "Stay with me for a bit." Ethan, holding a bowl, was unsteady on his feet. He swayed and asked if his birthday wish hadn't come true yet. At 11:59 and 56 seconds, Ethan leaned forward. A firm hand cupped the back of his neck. At the stroke of midnight, the sound of shattering porcelain echoed in the dining room as frosting-covered lips met the taste of expensive wine. The next thing Ethan knew, it was noon the next day. His head throbbed, and his lips were swollen. He sat bolt upright, a sense of dread washing over him. He rushed out of the bedroom to find the dining room a disaster, a shattered bowl lying on the floor. His first thought was about his security deposit. "You're awake." Julian's voice from behind him nearly made him jump out of his skin. He noticed Julian's lips were redder than usual, the lower one slightly chapped. "You don't remember any of it, do you?" Ethan gave a nervous laugh, asking what had happened to the bowl. Julian, leaning against the counter with a glass of water, asked if he needed a recap. He recounted the evening in a calm, flat voice. Ethan had presented the cake, sung the song, and urged him to make a wish. While his eyes were closed, Ethan had smeared frosting on his face. Then, as Ethan was clearing the dishes, Julian had stopped him and, taking advantage of his inebriated state, had kissed him. The bowl had shattered, but it hadn't interrupted the kiss. He wasn't sure if Ethan had been too drunk, too tired, or too overcome by the kiss to stand, but he had to hold him up. He described pressing him against the wall, the door, a chair, and finally lifting him onto the table to find a more comfortable position. He said Ethan had wrapped his arms around his neck and kissed him back until he fell asleep in his arms. Ethan stared at him, then reached out and felt Julian's forehead, then his own. "You don't have a fever," he muttered. "What kind of nonsense are you spouting?" He crouched down to clean up the broken bowl, dismissing the story as a ridiculous attempt to scare him for not cleaning up. "You should drink less," Julian said, his gaze distant. "The way you forget things is frustrating." The next few weeks were a blur of punishing shifts. One afternoon, a conflict with a belligerent patient who claimed Ethan had assaulted him led to a formal reprimand. The patient, stung by a bee, had stormed into a trauma bay where a defibrillation was in progress. Ethan had stopped him, perhaps with more force than necessary, and the man had fallen. Though security footage cleared him of any real violence, the incident was a mark against him. Julian's punishment was swift. He reassigned Ethan to the triage desk, a role usually handled by nurses and assistants. Indefinitely, he had said. The argument that followed was heated, ending with Ethan storming out. That night, miserable and angry, Ethan went out for drinks with 2 other residents. They commiserated about their own tyrannical attendings. Fueled by cheap beer, Ethan scrolled through his phone, landing on a photo he'd saved years ago. It was a picture of a man with a kind smile and a barely visible scar on his waist. He had looked at it 1,000 times, and his heart still sped up. He ended up at the hospital, in Abe's basement office, drunk and complaining about Julian. Abe, the old janitor, just listened patiently. He then revealed that Julian himself had been assigned to triage for 6 months when he was a resident, for a mistake far more serious than Ethan's. "He's toughening you up," Abe said. "He only made you do a month." That night, Ethan fell asleep on the couch in Abe's office, refusing to go home. Near midnight, Julian called. Abe answered, explaining the situation. Julian came to pick him up. On the way back, Ethan, half asleep and draped over Julian's shoulder, mumbled a drunken tirade, calling him a heartless demon, reminding him of the birthday dinner, the cake, and the unfair punishment. His warm, alcohol-scented breath ghosted across Julian's neck. "Just you wait," he slurred. "When I get back from triage, I'll be a new man." "I'm waiting," Julian murmured back. The 3 weeks at triage were unexpectedly transformative. Ethan dealt with everything from hysterical parents to lost pets, developing a patience he never knew he had. One afternoon, Julian and Chloe walked past the triage desk. Ethan was surrounded by 4 small children, lifting them into the air to their delighted squeals. Their mother was in the ER with an acute intestinal obstruction. Chloe remarked on how much Ethan had matured, how popular he had become with the nurses and the kids. She teased Julian, reminding him of his own 6-month stint there, and mentioned that one of the nurses was trying to set Ethan up on a date. Julian's face was a stony mask. The hair he needed a lobster dinner as an excuse to touch was being ruffled into a bird's nest by 4 toddlers, and Ethan was smiling at them. "Tell him he's back on rotation tomorrow," he said curtly to Chloe, and walked away. The next day, there was a new tension between them. They barely spoke. Julian assigned him to assist in a surgery the next day. "Desensitization therapy, stage 5, he said. "Do you think you can't handle it?" Ethan nodded vigorously, his heart pounding. "I can." That night, Julian took him to an even fancier restaurant. As Ethan devoured a spoonful of crab roe, he asked about the hospital's rotation schedule. He needed to go back to his university for a week for exams and to work on his thesis proposal. Julian listened, then placed a perfectly shelled piece of lobster on his plate. He asked if Ethan had family to visit over the holidays. Ethan explained it was just his mom and grandmother. Julian told him he was scheduled to work through the holidays. Ethan just nodded, his heart sinking at the loss of his winter break. Back at his university dorm, Ethan felt strangely empty. The bed was too small, the heating inadequate. The library chairs were uncomfortable compared to the wool rug in Julian's study. And Julian himself had vanished, not a single text or call. Then, late one night, a message popped up. Asleep? It was just 3 characters, not even a punctuation mark. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. He typed back, "Not yet." A brief, stilted conversation followed, ending with Julian telling him to good luck on his exams. On the last day of exams, Ethan rushed back to the hospital for a night shift. The ER was quiet. Around dawn, he was dozing at his desk when a commotion woke him. A young man was frantically calling for a doctor for his sister. The sister was a teenage girl with long hair, pale and doubled over in pain. She needed an examination, but she tearfully refused to be touched by a male doctor. It was a serious situation. Julian suspected acute appendicitis, but he couldn't confirm it without an exam. There were no female doctors on duty. The girl's brother, desperate, confessed that his sister was actually his brother. He had always identified as a girl and was terrified of male doctors. Just as Julian was about to call another hospital, Ethan had an idea. He disappeared and returned a few minutes later, a completely different person. He was wearing a mask, but he now had long, flowing golden hair that fell past his shoulders. His voice, when he spoke, was soft and high. The transformation was so convincing that everyone, including the patient, was stunned into silence. Ethan calmly performed the examination, confirming the diagnosis. The patient was transferred to the surgical department, where an all-female team was assembled for the operation. Afterward, in the office, Julian found Ethan still wearing the wig, looking dejected. Julian handed him a hot chocolate, telling him he'd done a good thing. He explained he hadn't let him do the surgery because the risk of his disguise being discovered was too high. He wanted Ethan's first real surgery to be one he could be there for all the way through. And, he added with a slight smile, he couldn't very well assist him dressed like that. He reached out and ruffled the golden wig. "Don't touch the princess's hair without offering a lobster," Ethan mumbled, a smile finally breaking through. The next day, the patient's brother returned, this time with a bouquet of roses, asking for the beautiful Dr. Sure. He came back every day for a week. The staff nicknamed him the lovesick suitor. The department was abuzz with how to handle the situation without revealing their deception. Finally, Julian announced he would take care of it. But Ethan, determined to fix his own mess, put the wig and mask back on and went to confront the man himself. As he was about to step out, Julian stopped him, a thoughtful look on his face. He followed Ethan out. The suitor, whose name was Feng Hui, was polite and earnest. He confessed his feelings, asking only for a chance to be friends. Ethan was at a loss for words. Just as he was about to deliver his rejection, an arm snaked around his waist, pulling him firmly against a solid body. It was Julian. "Is there something you need with my wife?" Julian's voice was casual, but his grip was possessive. Feng Hui was stunned. He stammered that he had heard the doctor was single. Julian's arm tightened. "She was," he said smoothly, "but I proposed last night." She said yes. He turned to Ethan, a playful glint in his eye. "Right, honey?" Ethan's back was soaked with sweat. He managed a weak nod. The performance continued, with Julian even offering to show Feng Hui their marriage certificate, claiming they had just gotten it that morning. Defeated, Feng Hui offered them the roses as a wedding gift and left. As soon as he was gone, Ethan tried to squirm out of Julian's grip, telling him he could let go now. But Julian held on, steering him back inside, claiming the man was still watching. He massaged the spot on Ethan's waist where he had been holding him, his touch lingering. Ethan dodged away, telling him to stop calling him that. "Calling you what?" Julian asked innocently. "Wife." Julian leaned in. "Would you have preferred husband?" That night, Julian took him to dinner to prevent him from being lured away by a free meal from someone else. He also confiscated the wig. The day before New Year's Eve, Julian gave Ethan the day off and dropped him at his family's home. That evening, a huge box of premium seafood, lobster, crab, and all of Ethan's favorites, arrived, a gift from Julian. Late that night, as the countdown began on TV, Ethan sent Julian a Happy New Year text. His phone rang almost immediately. Julian was at his apartment, alone. His family was scattered, one in Switzerland, one in surgery, and his grandfather, a health fanatic, was already in bed. Without thinking, Ethan invited him over for dumplings. Less than half an hour later, Julian was sitting at their dining table, charming Ethan's mother and grandmother. The evening ended with his grandmother insisting Julian stay the night. There were only 3 beds. Let Dr. Vance sleep in your bed, she told Ethan. You can sleep on the floor. In Ethan's room, after a brief, ridiculous struggle over who slept on the bed, which ended with Julian effortlessly lifting Ethan and depositing him there, they lay in the dark. The next semester, Ethan would be rotating to a different department. He wouldn't be Julian's resident anymore. He asked if that meant he would have to move out. Julian's reply was a simple MM. The next rotation assignments were announced. To everyone's shock, especially Ethan's, he was assigned to remain in the ER. Chloe later told him it was unheard of. Julian had personally requested him from the department head. He's never done that for anyone, she whispered. You're one of a kind. The months that followed were a whirlwind of learning and grueling work, overshadowed by an upcoming medical conference in Singapore. A handful of top residents would be chosen to attend. It was seen as a fast track to a permanent position at the hospital. Julian began an intense, round-the-clock training regimen for Ethan. On the morning of the final selection test, Ethan was late. He arrived, breathless, to find the doors closed and Julian waiting, his face like a thundercloud. Ethan tried to explain that he had stopped to help at a traffic accident, only to discover it was a staged scam to cheat an elderly man. He'd felt compelled to wait with the old man for the police to arrive. Julian didn't believe him. He was furious, leaving Ethan in his office to reflect while he rushed to a new emergency. A little while later, the old man from the accident appeared at the office door. He asked who Ethan's teacher was. Ethan proudly pointed to Julian's photo on the wall of honor. The old man smiled, a strange twinkle in his eye. Ethan, feeling comfortable, confessed his grand strategy. Missing the test was a blessing in disguise. It meant he didn't have to risk failing, and more importantly, he didn't have to spend a week in Singapore under Julian's 24/7 scrutiny. This way, he got a week of freedom. The old man laughed heartily, telling Ethan he was a wise young man. 3 days later, on the plane to Singapore, Julian's colleague asked him why he was traveling alone. Julian recounted the story of Ethan's tardiness, describing the wise-looking old man with a long beard. His colleague froze, then started to laugh. It slowly dawned on Julian. The old man was his colleague's mentor, and Julian's own estranged grandfather, the retired director of the hospital. He had called his grandfather, who refused to grant Ethan a retest, amused by the little rascal's desire for freedom. For the 6-hour flight, Julian stared at his phone, which was on airplane mode. He had told Ethan to text him with any problems, but there was nothing. When they landed, he immediately checked his messages. 8 notifications, all spam. He opened his social media. 2 new posts appeared at the top of his feed. One from Chloe, one from Ethan. It was a photo of the entire ER night shift staff, including Ethan, at a karaoke bar, all of them grinning, a beer in Ethan's hand. The caption read, "The demon is away. The residents will play. First night of freedom." Julian gripped his phone, his knuckles white. "Ethan Cole," he muttered under his breath. "You just wait."